Let us get the sound right first. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lyubov Varlamova, and I'm the head of iCube Project Bureau. In our organization, we focus on general understanding of the urban environment and a general understanding of this environment by kids, and creating environment where kids can spend time with the adults. And today we'll talk about a topical issue faced by modern society. And this is it. How do we create a space in which the urban environment will be chosen by kids over the gadgets? So what should we do? How do we lure kids into the streets? And how do we make sure that they have a good time there and they don't try to escape into this virtual environment? Decades ago, the concept of urban development was pretty primitive. Old age pensioners were resting on benches, and kids were playing on seesaws. However, computer games and rapid expansion of digital world started to impact the way kids spend their times. They spend less time playing real games with each other. So they undergo a sort of transformation. They get more involved in social media, and they more communicate there rather than face to face. And over the course of today's session, we would like to find an answer to the question, what we need to do in order to open the city up for the kids, in order to create an environment other than a playground or a park. And today our session will feature a number of speakers, and one of them is Jonathan Lazar, a co-founder of Out Architectural Bureau, Maria Pamelova, Vitaly Survilo, Anastasia Tatulova, the co-founder of Anderson Cafe Network, and Ariadna Friedman, a coordinator of the Center of Symbolism, Childhood and Development. And Ariadna will be our first speaker, and I would like to welcome her to the stage. Mrs. Friedman, are you ready? And Mrs. Friedman studies city from the standpoint of the extent to which a city can be friendly to kids. So it's an expanded understanding of urban environment from the kids' standpoint. And so what is it that we miss? What modern cities miss in order to be more comfortable for kids? And what should we do in order to get the kids back on the streets, in a positive sense of this word?
I'm going to speak in English, and I want to thank for this invitation. I'm coming from São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm going to speak a little bit about some initiatives and researches and programs going on in São Paulo, in Brazil. So I don't know here. It's nothing. Yeah, thank you. Okay. I don't know if you know. Next, please. Yeah. That Brazil have 207 million people, and São Paulo is the biggest capital in Latin America with 21 million people. I think that is similar to here in Moscow. And from those, 33% of the population are children. 68 million children and adolescents from 0 to 19. So a very, very big population of children. Please. Next one, please. And São Paulo is really, literally, a very multicultural metropolis. We have citizens from all over the world living together, from many countries, not only from Latin America, not only from Europe, from the States, but from Asia and other parts of the world, and a lot of people in São Paulo specifically coming from other regions of the country. You can go. It's a very really... next, please. Next, please. It's a very complex city because we have from modern buildings and people that use cars, buses, metros, bicycles go, and we have people that live in modern areas, historical areas, revitalized areas, and very poor communities. So it's a very complex city, and it's about what I'm going to speak about on children programs. Please. So here, what I'm going to speak about is about specifically 3 programs we have developed. I've been working with researchers and with initiatives and with programs with many foundations, NGOs, and schools. And one of those interesting programs in 1990 was developed with a very big newspaper in Brazil because there was a misunderstanding thinking that children don't play anymore. This is something that all over the world people are saying. Children don't know how to play nowadays with the gadgets. They are all day long with the gadgets. So we developed with this newspaper a very big research, asking children using the newspaper as a media of communication, how do they were playing. And so we received 10,000 documents from children from 2 to 14 years old, especially from children to 7 to 12 years old that sent us photographs, texts, films, pictures, drawings, telling us about what they were playing, and was really impacted for us, astonishing to discover that not only children were teaching us and informing us that they really play a lot, but showing us the diversity of games and spaces they used to play when we adults are not teaching nothing. So do you think it's possible to enter the first website so I can show you a little bit what was this developed? If not, I can... No? Okay. So, come on, the next, please. Okay. Next, please. Here, we had the opportunity to really hear children from Brazil, and they told us many things about this. The first one is they are very creative. Children are very creative when we let them be spontaneous, and when many times we are there as adults to teach or to try to show things. And so this generation show us that they invent a lot. They invent games. They invent many names of games. There are traditional games that we discovered, but reinvented. And so children from schools, from associations, from toy libraries, care centers, holiday camps, communities, we have many indigenous communities and other ones, and from cultural and art centers and sports centers send to us all those materials. And we discovered many things analyzing those materials. And so with the newspaper, we construct a platform, and you can have access to this platform in Portuguese, Mapa da Infância Brasileira, Mapa do Brincar. And there you can see the different games all over the country, by clicking in different areas of Brazil. And children send that photograph, and so we have children that learned adults how to play. And what we saw between many other aspects is this diversity and multiculturality, because children incorporate elements of other cultures, other languages, modern technology, objects they are with them, elements of their daily lives, elements, animals, foods, actions, and all this is inside the games they are inventing. Next, please. This is one of the projects. And then in 2013, we began another big project that we called Brazilian Childhood Map. What was this? This was something to hear children and to hear people and to discover what were the different initiatives with children and for children all over the country. And so we constructed a platform on the internet where people from different parts of the country could put on this platform their different initiatives. One more, please. So we discovered only, especially in São Paulo, more than 3,000 groups, initiatives, territories, neighborhoods, areas of the city, and different proposals coming from people that, not necessarily foundations and schools and NGOs, but ordinary people that were constructing and developing proposals for children all over the city that impact the quality of life of different groups of children. One more, please. One of those initiatives we discovered, a very, very interesting one, managed by architects, young architects that began to hear children and families they were going to different communities and asking them what do they want for their communities. And the way to express themselves was by maquettes, and so they joined the community, and children and their families and other people living in those communities put on the maquette what they dream for their community. And then, next one please, in 1 week those communities began to clean, began to plant, began to paint, began to change those communities. This group has 15 years of experience, and they work with training young leaders with the development of communities in Brazil. This is a name philosophy, Elos Philosophy, and they learn by hearing people and by action, and it's incredible the speed. With volunteers and people from the community, in 1 week, they transform those communities with the empowerments of people that are living there. And then The next one I'm going to show you, there are many, many other ones, but this one especially is in the periphery of the city, a very poor community, and an NGO went there and began a project to empower children and to potentialize children capacity to lead with songs and with music and with instrument. And so they construct a group that they play music in different ways of the city. And so those children are saved in a way because those NGOs like this one and many other ones that exist in Brazil are seeing to give opportunities to not only empower but ameliorate the quality of life of different children and families. And so you can go, please. Next one. So nowadays, here we have 40 children musicians aged between 11 and 20 years old. And they are considered, those children, social actors because they can express themselves by their abilities and they have opportunities to live their childhood in that significant way. They go to courses, to workshops, in the rehearsals against the school period, and they can develop their artistic skills and strengthen their citizenship. And to close my speech, only to speak you about some tendencies. As an anthropologist and an educator, we are now working on some tendencies. One of them is listening to children, what they feel, what they live, what they want, what are their potentials, and what are also their limitations. But this is to think about our decisions as adults on what we are going to construct for them in our cities. Another tendency is the importance to create opportunities for children participation, and how so. It's not a thing to ask children all the way, but children by playing, by drawing, by dancing, by playing music, can express themselves, and what's something that for us adults, it's very important to read these expressions. Understanding that children are also authors, social actors, and that we need to orient adults, researchers, education, adults and families on how to interpret what children are expressing. And so we are creating, not only in Brazil, but in many other countries, listening and observation methodologies by ludic actions and methodologies and collective paintings and registrations and photo exhibitions. We have many ways, and especially I'm nowadays teaching adults how to work with this, because it's a very new thing, hearing and listening for children about to adapt, to adequate what we are offering from them for in the cities, in the parks, at schools, and it's that we have many other things to tell and to share with you, but the time to do this. And thank you very much for your attention. I'm open to questions now.
Спасибо, Адриана.
Thank you very much, Adriana. You have done a lot of very important work, and it's important not only for São Paulo, but it is important for all of us overall. And I have to say that in your research, I think that you managed to prove one more time how important it is that children play, that they have independent play, and that they're involved into the building their own environment. I have a very practical question when it comes to Russian cities. I believe that not everybody understands what it is, a child-friendly environment in a city. And so we have witnessed a number of attempts to involve children into the designing of this kid-friendly environment. So I would like to ask you, what are your recommendations? Did you use certain methodologies to support your work, maybe methodologies that allowed you to achieve such remarkable results? And what sort of results did you achieve when it comes to involving children? Are there any guidelines? How do we treat the environment? How do we involve the children?
Okay. Thank you for your question. Really, there is something. We always want to change and to offer better things to children, for children in our cities. But the thing is that children are expressing themselves all the time. When children play, they construct little cities. When children speak between them, when children get this toy and not the other one, when children move and play music. Every child has a very important potential. And another thing very important, me as an anthropologist, I see cultural groups, the context. And every context and cultural expression shows us that children are similar but are very different, because they not only have the local values, but only have their family's values. And so how to see children, how to hear listening to children. The most important is that maybe it's not so difficult to go there and offer and invent things. But if we can approach to children and respect what they are doing, their spontaneous expressions, and be quiet, we as an adults, that we are always interviewing and we are always asking questions to children. Children will answer our questions, but okay, let me play again. But if with respect, because it's an ethical thing to involve in all this, can observe children, can hear children, not asking questions, and see what they are playing with, what are their preferences, how they create with what the city or the school or the family or the neighborhoods offers. We are going to learn a lot from them. And what to do with this? We can then invite children to participate on constructing little cities, or telling us by their playing or by their drawings or by their writings what they do want. And so it's nothing to do with interviewing children and asking questions. It has more to do with observing, respecting, and then stop to see what they are telling us by their non-verbal expressions.
Спасибо большое, Адриана.
Thank you very much, Adriana. We are going to continue our session, and I would like to give the floor. I think the organizers will probably change the schedule a bit, but I would like to invite Vitaly Survey. Oh, he's not here. All right, then I would like to give the floor to Maria Pomelova, who is an architect and a co-founder of the Chekharda Bureau. Thank you very much, Adriana. I have to admit, I am a great supporter of the Chekharda Bureau, because this bureau is already implementing projects that relate to children involvement here in Russia. So I got the microphone. So they're already working on involving the children into the process of constructing play areas for kids. They also do a lot to include elements of nature into these game spaces, which is very important for kids who grow up in big cities, especially in cities like Moscow. So right now, I would like to ask Maria to tell us about her experience. How do we create play areas together with children? What sort of principles we have to maintain when we're trying to design these play areas? Thank you very much, Lyubov. We are an architectural bureau. We design and implement a number of projects. This is a very important part of our day-to-day work. Of course, we can design whatever we want, but unless it's built, it doesn't exist. And when it comes to building, it is not an easy way, sometimes in Russia. But we embarked on this journey to see our ideas translated into reality. So that the children have an opportunity to enjoy our projects and play. So we design and create unique play areas that are centered around nature. And why is it that we decided to integrate nature into our playgrounds? Well, having studied international experience and Russian environment, we realized that when it comes to huge cities, or actually cities of any size, children really don't have enough access to nature. Even when we go to a park, what we find there, we find a playground made out of steel or plastics. So there is a certain lack of natural materials. I don't need to tell you why all of us need nature, especially children. Contact with nature is indispensable to kids. It's vital for their psychological development. That is why we decided to concentrate on nature. This is a playground that we designed and built in Moscow, in Izmailovo Park. You can see we use natural materials. We used the theme of nests, rocks, boulders, twigs. So what we do, we take actual natural materials that we find in the forest. We select our materials ourselves. You can see that sometimes we work with driftwood. You see a log which we used to create a play element. When we created our first playground, we realized that sometimes people didn't understand what can be done with these play materials. What can be done, for instance, or how you can play. If you look at the top picture, how can you play with these logs? People would ask us, why do we need this? What can we do there? But once kids would come to the playground, they never had this problem. They would start running around. They had 100 million options of what to do with these logs. So that's removed all of the questions from adults. Such natural playgrounds are wonderful because they do not give you a ready answer. They don't tell you this is a ship, so you can play pirates, or you can play You can pretend to go on a sea voyage. These sort of playgrounds, they actually leave all of the options open. You see this nest, the backgrounds of the picture. Well, kids used it as a rocket for pretend plan, but even we ourselves couldn't actually imagine this. Of course, we had certain ideas, certain scenarios when building these playgrounds, but what we found out is that kids always find additional meanings. They always find expanded scenarios when it comes to such non-typical, so to speak, or such unusual structures. And this is our playground that we built in Tatarstan. We call it the Big Oyster. It's one of my favorites. And here we went even further. We started using polymetric principles. We would take a natural shape and we would write a script according to natural principles. As you can see, this is a shell, the carcass, and the covering is built using parametrical models, and it is identical to an actual seashell that you can find in nature. This is a huge pavilion. It gives a lot of space where kids can play. They can sit in a big net. They can climb ropes. It's 8 meters high. And you can see in the left, in the picture that's in the left corner, you see a kid is right under the roof. So we like these sort of playgrounds when children can take risks, when they can select what it is that they want to do. We believe that an opportunity to take risks gives kids adrenaline, gives them a boost of energy. And of course, all of the risks that children take, well, we plan for these risks. And I have to say that when it comes to our playgrounds, we do not have any unplanned risks. So kids never climb onto the roof. So it's a reasonable risk. Yes, exactly that. That's what I'm talking about. It's a reasonable risk. Thank you very much. All of the play elements have been designed in such a way to make sure that the risks that children take are reasonable, but at the same time that these risks remain. So this is very important for our design bureau. Inside of the shelf, we have a huge mesh that is also built as an actual shell spiral. This is a bit of an unusual project for us. This is a huge castle, and you can see that it also spirals around like a shelf. We have a lot of turrets here. There is a big bridge that spans right into the forest. This is one of our favorite playgrounds in Kazan. These are mushrooms. I don't know, people call differently, but we call these structures mushrooms. Each mushroom is 6 meters high, but again, we designed it in such a way so that there is no opportunity to climb on top of it. So this playground has 3 so-called mushrooms. There is a way to transfer between the mushrooms. Again, we use the parametric software. And the reason we started using parametric software was because we developed an interest. We wanted to see how it is that children behave inside of a natural object, such as a shell, a mushroom, or something similar. How would a kid feel inside? This is an absolutely different reality for all of us. We can never end up, say, inside of a shell under normal circumstances. So we made a space inside according to natural principles. And the way that you would feel there. Like you can get a chance to feel like an oyster, or like say like a worm that's eating a mushroom. What we also do with our playgrounds, we include a lot of natural elements, which are like not just by kids, but by their parents a lot. We saw a lot of adults who would sit down on these structures, who would take pictures and selfies. Again, these are the mushrooms. This is one of our first playgrounds. We did it at the Architectural Archstoyania Festival in 2015. It is a nest. Maria, if you can, we don't have much time. So again, when it comes to the nests, we build these nests in a similar way that they're made by birds. So these are the nests as well. And I think this is the most interesting case study when we built, so together with children, we built a lighthouse last year together with kids. Kids were from 3 to 14 years old. So we worked together with them. First, we designed the lighthouse using Schuhoff architectural principles. Then, of course, children were wearing protective gear, helmets, gloves. They worked with actual saws. So they worked with actual nails. We polished everything. We used a manipulator to put it together. It's a 6-meter high lighthouse. But again, everything, when it comes to preparation and final assembly, was done by kids. So again, this structure too was built by kids too. But this year, we built playgrounds in the Green School in the Gorky Park. Again, kids came up with the design concept. So kids developed the design. We didn't have a lot of building materials. So kids arranged all of the elements around. They actually polished everything. They put lacquer on everything, and then they were playing there. This is wonderful. I think that the applause is quite rightful. So, Maria, I understand, and I know, looking at your work, that you use the most state-of-the-art rules when it comes to creating playing environments. But here we also have architects and civil servants in the audience, and these people always tend to reflect when they see something that's unusual. And their main question is, what do you do about parents who think that these playgrounds might be dangerous? What do you do to make sure that parents accept these playgrounds in their cities, on their territory?
Indeed, it is a problem in Russia, and not only in regions, but it is also a problem in Moscow. And it's difficult to accept that this is something non-conventional, non-standard, something which has yet to be fully accepted. And quite a lot of time we spent at the pre-construction stage, and we tell the group of volunteers what we are about to do, and like, for example, at the project stage, we visited the site together with the volunteers and with parents. We told them about what we do. We made them aware of the international experience. They shared their concerns with us. We have accepted some of these concerns, then we have dismissed others. So based on that, we have corrected our project because parents indeed had some concerns, and it was very difficult to dismiss them all. The easier way is to give them some sort of experience, and that experience will become a point at which they will accept the remaining part. But however, we were lucky. We were lucky to have a number of playgrounds and a number of sites which are already prepared, and we referred all the concerned people to those sites, and statistics is very favorable. The figures are very favorable. The kids do not get injured, so it's okay. I believe your experience is invaluable, especially in the context of Russian cities. I think after the session we'll talk about the standards which are to be complied on this, and and probably in the end of the forum you will also tell our people about these standards, because that's a very good practice which can be emulated in other cities. And now I would like to invite Jonathan Lazar, who is the co-founder of the Out Architectural Bureau. So we started talking about the importance of nature in urban environments for kids, and it is especially important in megalopolises and large cities, and it shapes skills of children, and it makes them play in a specific way. And as far as I understand, in your projects, you are trying to incorporate the natural element into what you're doing. What objectives do you pursue? Why are you trying to incorporate nature in your projects?
We are trying to incorporate nature in our project in order to make it part of a pedagogical way of nurseries and school. And actually, I think I can expose it in my presentation. Well, first of all, I would like to give a short presentation of my office, Out, which is based in Rome and is composed by several architects. And so we believe that the architectural project is a tool capable of propelling a certain discourse through the envisioning of new and even provocative spaces. So this very approach has been used while tackling the competition brief, seeking ideas for the nursery of the future. Well, it's a work that we are still expanding after its positive results. And even though we love streets, so I'll try to give an explanation of these educational spaces for children that integrate nature. So the nursery of the future. Two are the main considerations that we looked at and that led us initially to what we regarded as a rather banal proposal, but that eventually turned out to be, or at least to appear, quite revolutionary. First of all, we acknowledge that the lack of direct experience completely misled children's perception of the world and of its most basic processes. It's especially true in urban settings, where children often ignore that milk comes from living animals, or that beans don't sprout in cans. And secondly, we realized that the dominant per-school system keeps children in classrooms where plants barely peek out from the windows and animals are just in plastic, you know. As far back as 1912, the famous pedagogist Maria Montessori was already aware that, and I quote, in our time, in the civic environment of our society, children live too far from nature, while they should experience nature, not only getting to know it through study and admiration. So this objective hasn't been achieved yet. Even if we consider the most virtuous examples, the contact with animals and plants is reduced to weekly appointments. So we proposed with Nursery Fields Forever a real hybrid between a farm and a school. And it didn't want to represent an umpteenth enrichment program attached to a standard educational model, but rather a deep reconnection with the basic, direct, and slow principles that should exist between mankind and nature. So love for... It's blocked. I think it doesn't work. Yeah. So a real hybrid between a farm and the school, where the development of children would be encouraged by the interaction with plants and animals. So love for the environment and sustainable agricultural knowledge, eco-friendly techniques, but yeah, techniques sometimes doesn't help. It's still not working. Yeah. So love for the environment, sustainable agricultural knowledge, and eco-friendly techniques are the ABC of this preschool. And as a matter of fact, attitudes towards the environment start developing at a very early stage, and once formed, do not change easily. Furthermore, children are a very effective agent in promoting good environmental behaviors in others and in adults. So the spatial definition of the nursery wanted to establish an integration of traditional scholastic environments and experimental spaces that merge farming and didactic. So rather than merely relying on a fixed subdivision in classrooms, the daily and seasonal routine of the infants unfolds along a trajectory that is mainly based on natural cycles. Domestication here plays a crucial cultural role. Actually, children collaborate because they share a mission that involves the well-being of an animal or of a plant. So it means learning respect and symbiotic interaction with others and nature. And it also helps stimulating subjective processes, such as the development of self-esteem, of sense of responsibility, and helps building the environmental consciousness of future adults and consumers. So this project obtained quite a huge resonance on the web and on press worldwide. And not only between architects, but especially between mummies and daddies craving for a nursery like this for their offspring. Also in China, yes. Some developers are trying with us to establish this venture in their countries. So Nursery Fields Forever expanded into an autonomous organization still led by out members. And now we are developing a sustainable and easily replicable construction system, while some experts we gathered in education and in permaculture are developing a series of guidelines to follow in order to run schools in line with our approach. Well, recently we had the opportunity to apply some of these ideas in a nursery we designed in Sardinia, Italy. The project tries to fulfill a double role. Firstly, it reports a decline in the urban form and tries to propel a reflection around the practice of making cities through the use of traditional local typologies and materials, such as rammed earth in this case. And then these traditional references become important pedagogical elements of the school. So The kindergarten, just like the house of the typology, splits the plot in two parts. A slimmer one for playing and farming, and a wider one that hosts a botanical garden. So we believe that integrating a kindergarten with public facilities that turn it into a reference point for the whole local community is of paramount importance also for the children that can benefit from an open school and a lively environment. So our tiny suggestion to make cities more exciting and interesting than these for children would be to avoid the detachment of their spaces from the rest of the city. And at the same time to take advantage of these spaces as opportunities where to enrich the biodiversity within urban centers. But this is a very bad example. In Rome, if you come, I can show you a few more around, unfortunately. So we have, our children have a reason to be sad
Джонатан,
about.
я извиняюсь, можно скорее, потому что время
Jonathan, could you please speed up a bit because we're running out of time?
Yeah, they will be sad apart football. Our children will be very upset about these spaces. And to conclude, I'd like to say that even tiny reconnections between city and nature can become a catalyst to raise good citizens of the environment. And children have an endless imagination, and sometimes it's just enough to give them a very small hint. Thank you.
Спасибо, Джонатан.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I think that future belongs to these projects, indeed. And because the world keeps developing and educational institutions are expanding, the space undergoes a transformation, and they start to acquire more and more of pedagogical functions. I have a question for you. How do you think these educational institutions should exist and function? Should they be financed by state or should they be financed privately?
The last example I show, the school in Sardinia, is financed by the government. Actually, of course, all these things we are proposing, such as having animals within the school, plants are quite easy actually, but animals can be a problem, should comply with local regulations. But our aim, that's why Nursery Fields Forever became a real autonomous organization, is to change actually these rules. Other developers around the world, such as South Africa, Turkey, are private developers. Still, they also have to comply to regulation, but it's a bit easier, you know. So I would say both.
Спасибо большое. Конечно,
Thank you so much. And it's difficult to think that this project is viable in Russia, especially given the fact that it should be financed by the state. We understand that they will run into a lot of operational difficulties, but we need to move in that direction. We need to expand our horizons. And now I would like to invite our next speaker. And now we'll talk about business contributing to developing of urban environment which is comfortable for kids. And we'll talk about ways to build business on creating an organization for families to spend time there. Anastasia Tatulova, the founder of Family Cafe Network, Anderson. Good afternoon. And I don't think it's the right thing to say here, but our relations with designers is extremely complex. And I'd like to start my presentation from the following point. All these spaces which are designed by architects and designers, they're very fancy and they are almost impossible to use because they're built of materials which do not fit kids. They are lots of white color and they don't comply with safety standards. These structures break when kids climb on them. And the key thing we need to understand is this. There are two things of primary importance. One is safety requirements, which are impossible to ignore. I look at these things gladly, like building a nest and anything else, but I understand no way I'm going to have this on my site, because safety is of utmost importance when you design spaces for kids. Indeed, I liked very much all those spaces and the pictures which we saw here, but touch the wood. If you implement this in a city, you can easily go to prison. But we will talk about it in the end of the session. That will be exactly the point. Because I was greatly impressed by previous speakers, so I'm a bit distracted. But let me briefly tell you about my purpose of being here at this forum. Anderson Cafe. First Anderson Cafe was opened in 2009. Now we have 45 cafes and a food factory. So we also sell food. As a retailer, we have 45 cafes, and we are reaching out to other markets, opening up in CIS and in Europe. Why the project was a success? I think that in 2009, those of you who have kids, in 2009, I had small kids. I had small kids now. One is 20 and another one is 18. And I traveled a lot and realized that Moscow is not a very kid-friendly city. And it's also not a very parent-friendly city. There were two ways of spending time. You go to an adult place and you have a problem with your kids running around and you screaming on your kids or hushing your kids. There was one option, and another option, you wake up on Sunday and realize you need to do something for the kid, and you take him to a kid's place where you have to stand or sit at a plastic table in the best scenario, and you don't feel yourself comfortable. So that was a nightmare. So there was no place where adults and kids could have easily spent time. But the situation within the last 5 or 6 years is changing for the better, and it is great to see the city becoming more and more comfortable for the kids.
I don't know if any of you visited the breastfeeding room in Zaryadia. Who has kids here? Can you raise your hands? I have 3 kids. So basically, in this park, in Zaryadia Park, there's a room for breastfeeding. So what they have there is a wonderful tile floor. It's in the toilet. So to breastfeed the kid, there is a plastic chair, a plastic stool. If you're a mother, if you ever breastfed a kid, then you would realize that this room was designed by a person who doesn't have any clue about the needs of a breastfeeding mother. There is no table, there is no space where you can put down the baby. So this is the most important thing that I'm talking about. We've started working on creating the kids-friendly environment, but we're doing it now without fully realizing the demands of the people we're doing it for. That's what Adriana was talking about. We have to realize the demands of the kids and their parents. So this is what Anderson cafes are all about. We have a lot of celebrations. There are family celebrations, not just for kids. So we have 190,000 patrons every month. 60,000 patrons are kids, as you can see. We have the most kid patrons. We design play areas, and I have to tell you very honestly that we do everything ourselves. We haven't been working with any designers. We do everything in-house. I told you why at the start of the project, because every time we tried to work with designers, we had to revamp the whole thing. We have a lot of things that are based on our philosophy. I'm sorry, I cannot really, stick to a 2-minute time frame. So either I continue talking or you can ask me questions. Yeah, please go on. So the way that we design a play area, what's important for us, what is the cornerstone of our philosophy? Well, first of all of our tables have rounded edges, and that's very important because, grown-up tables, the height of the table is right at the level of the forehead of a kid. So we use rounded edges. We do not use slippery materials. We do not have any power outlets that are located lower than 90 centimeters of the floor. So basically, we pay a lot of attention to find out such safe approaches, to find out what kind of materials can and cannot be used. Of course, playrooms, they have to be revamped every year. Children destroy it completely once a year at least. Another thing, what is also a cornerstone of our philosophy, what's also important to design communal spaces in a city, our philosophy is based on our own experience. If we believe that smoking is not something that should be done, then we stick to this philosophy. Our staff, they don't smoke. We never allow smoking in the cafe or on our summer terraces, even before the anti-smoking law came into effect. We are a family-oriented cafe. You cannot just leave your child with us. You have to spend time together with the kids. So we support family traditions. So, for instance, a tradition of a weekend lunch. We do not educate. This is a very strong position that we have. We do not have any educational material, so we entertain, and we believe that life is much more important than education for kids. They have to be in a comfort zone where they're not educated endlessly, where they can relax. So a safe environment, that's very important for us. So we position ourselves as a state-of-the-art sandbox. Because why we talk about ourselves as a sandbox? Well, I'm really, really sorry, and I do apologize, but I have to stop you, although we would love to hear what you have to say, but maybe we go back to the issue which is very important for this country and for our environment. So let's talk about what materials should be considered dangerous, what sort of construction codes should be there. Will public officials go to prison if we use unsafe materials? Could you please maybe talk for 30 seconds about that? Well, first of all, we have special codes in Russia which regulates playground equipment. We also have, they're the same as construction codes for regular housing. So if you violate construction codes, then the house will go down, and then who will be responsible? The architect, the engineer, the public officials. So the same is true for playgrounds. There are 13 government codes or construction codes for playgrounds. So when you build your playgrounds, you stick to construction codes, and in case, let's say, something happens, and then who will be responsible? A parent? Well, in any case, a parent is responsible for the well-being of a child, and let's say if something occurs, if there is an injury, there are certain procedures which we follow. And so we design our playgrounds according to codes. So we build it according to codes. But there is also an important part, such as servicing. If servicing is done regularly, if it's done according to the codes, and it is the same if we talk about, let's say, furniture. So if everything is done according to establish codes and procedures, and let's say we find out that certain codes were not taken into account, then it's, of course, our fault. But let's say, for instance, if something wasn't used correctly, for instance, a child climbs onto the room. So am I right in understanding that if we use construction codes to design playgrounds, and if we service them according to the codes, then there will be no consequences, no accidents, and this is the practice that should be introduced in Russia. I see that you don't agree with this opinion. Again, we only have about 30 seconds because the next session is about to start. And well, basically, all of these beautification projects, they are not subject to expert review. So therefore, a person who would be responsible, that would be you as an architect, also a person who is commissioning it. But again, not everything is so straightforward or clear-cut here. So you cannot just say that even if you stick to the codes, then the parent will be responsible. I agree with you. And then these codes, they're quite old, and there are no clear-cut codes for playgrounds. If, let's say, something happens, then you have to remember that you're dealing with kids, and then, let's say a mother will contact all of the major newspapers, and the prosecutor's office will always side with the parents. And let's say if we have a playground next to our cafe, then that's something that we encounter every month. Jonathan?
I just wanted to add one thing, that maybe they are a bit extreme, but I understand that, let's say that we have to comply with the rules and that danger is established by the rules, but also the perception of danger is subjective in a way. So we should avoid, in my opinion, a philosophy which is partially based on anxiety. That is what I saw before. So kind of in between way could be a good way.
Абсолютно согласна.
I agree with you fully, and I think this is what we're talking about when we talk about reasonable risk while designing and building play areas for kids. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I understand that this topic is very stimulating. But if you have any questions to any of the speakers, you can talk to them informally. Thank you very much.